You already know you're smart, but a crow just outsmarted a PhD student. And nobody knows why. Not really. You would think we'd have figured this out by now. We've been studying animals for centuries. But the more we look, the more unsettling the answer becomes. Because the real question isn't why animals solve problems. The real question is what that says about you. Stay until the end. The last part will change how you think about your own intelligence forever. Let's start with something simple. A crow is hungry. There's a piece of meat at the bottom of a narrow tube. The crow's beak can't reach it. The crow looks around. It finds a stick. Too short. It finds a longer stick. Still not enough. So the crow takes the two sticks and shoves them together to make one long tool. Then it reaches in and gets the food. First try. No training. No reward history with this exact puzzle. The crow had never seen this before, and it solved it in minutes. Now here's what should bother you. You are holding a phone right now that you didn't design. You're wearing clothes you didn't make. You're living inside systems built by thousands of people before you. The crow had none of that. It was alone. And it figured it out anyway. So who is actually smarter here? Scientists have been asking this exact question for decades, and the deeper they dig, the stranger it gets. Because the more they test wild animals, the more they keep finding something they were never supposed to find. Problem solving that looks almost human, in creatures with brains the size of a walnut. In 2014, a team of researchers at the University of Auckland ran a series of tests on New Caledonian crows. These birds live on a small island in the South Pacific. They have no contact with humans in the wild, but they do something no other animal outside of apes was thought to do. They make tools. Not just use them, make them. They strip leaves from branches at precise angles. They shape hooks out of twigs, and they pass this knowledge down to their young, generation to generation, like a culture like us. But here's what's fascinating. The researchers didn't just test whether the crows could use tools, they tested whether crows understood the concept of cause and effect. They hid food in a box that could only be opened by a marble dropping into a hole. The marble was inside a tube. The tube was held up by a string. To get the marble, you had to pull the string. But there were multiple strings. Only one was attached to the tube. The others were decoys. The crows looked. They traced the strings with their eyes, and then they pulled the right one. Not randomly, not by trial and error. They reasoned it out. First try. Alex Taylor, the lead researcher, said he had to keep making the puzzles harder because the crows kept solving them too fast. Now pause here for a second, because this is where it gets personal for you. When you were born, you could not do this. A human infant cannot pass a version of this test until around 3 to 4 years old. These crows are born with the cognitive hardware to reason about hidden causes, and we are not. Or at least we develop it much later. So where does this come from? That's the question that's been haunting researchers for years, and it's not just crows. In 2019, a study published in the journal Current Biology looked at great tits, a small, common garden bird, completely unrelated to crows, completely different brain structure. Researchers put out a puzzle box, food hidden inside, accessible only through a series of steps in the right order. The birds in a population in the UK learned to solve it. Then something strange happened. Once a few birds in the population had learned the solution, the knowledge spread. Not because the other birds figured it out, because they watched and copied social learning in a bird, in a common garden bird that most people walk past without a second glance. But here's where it gets even stranger. The researchers went back years later. The original birds who knew the solution were gone. Dead. But the solution was still being used by the new generation. They had inherited a behavior they had never been taught directly. It had become culture. It had outlasted the individuals who invented it. Sound familiar? Because that's exactly what happened to you. You didn't invent reading. You didn't invent math. You didn't invent the concept of cooking food to kill bacteria. Someone figured it out. Others copied it. You inherited it. You are, right now, living inside inherited solutions to problems you have never personally faced, and you call that intelligence. But what does that make the birds? Let's go deeper. In 2016, researchers at the University of Cambridge ran a study on octopuses. Now octopuses are a completely different category of mind. They split from our evolutionary line over 500 million years ago. Their neurons are distributed across their entire body. Most of their brain power is in their arms. Literally. Each arm can make decisions independently. And yet, researchers placed an octopus in a tank with a child-proof pill bottle, the kind that requires you to push down and twist simultaneously. Two actions at once. A coordinated, multi-step task. The octopus opened it. Not immediately, but within minutes. Without hands, without shoulders, without a centralized brain commanding each limb. The researcher who led the study, Jennifer Mather, had spent her career arguing that octopuses had something no invertebrate was supposed to have: personality, play behavior, curiosity. She documented individual octopuses in the wild repeatedly visiting interesting objects with no food value. Just to investigate, just to explore. What do you call that? This is where the standard scientific answer starts to break down. For a long time, the official explanation was simple. Animals solve problems because of survival pressure. Hunger drives trial and error. The lucky behavior gets repeated. Over enough generations, it looks like intelligence, but it isn't. It's just evolution and conditioning. That explanation worked for a while. Then researchers started noticing something they couldn't explain away. In 2011, a study by Josep Call at the Max Planck Institute in Germany tested chimpanzees on a task with no survival component at all. The reward wasn't food. It was information. 2 tubes. One had a peanut inside. One was empty. The chimps couldn't see inside, but they could shake the tubes. The researchers predicted the chimps would shake randomly. They didn't. They shook one tube, heard the peanut, then immediately stopped. They didn't shake the other tube. They didn't need to. They had gathered exactly the information required. Nothing more. That is not conditioning. That is not trial and error. That is information management. That is the same mental move a good detective makes. Gather the minimum data you need to be certain. Then act. And this is where the real twist comes in. The one the standard model of animal intelligence cannot handle. Researchers started asking a different question. Not, can animals solve problems, but do animals plan? Do they think about a future state that doesn't exist yet and work backward to create it? That is the cognitive skill that supposedly separates humans from everything else. Foresight. The ability to imagine a future you haven't lived yet. In 2006, a landmark study by Nicklas Mulcahy and Josep Call tested bonobos and orangutans. They were given a tool. The tool was useless in the current location, but it would be useful in a different room they would be taken to later. An hour later, the researchers watched to see if the apes would carry the tool with them. The apes did. They carried a tool across a time gap to a future problem they were anticipating. They planned. But what came next shocked even the researchers who ran the test. A follow-up study in 2017 tested ravens, not primates, birds. Ravens with brains smaller than your fist. Same test. Same result. The ravens planned too. They carried tools and tokens across time and space to solve future problems. And they performed at the same level as the great apes. Same as chimpanzees. Same as bonobos. A bird. Lund University researcher Kabadayi published the results and described it as one of the most startling findings in comparative cognition in years. Because what it suggested was dangerous to the old story we told about minds. Planning for the future was not supposed to be a bird thing. It was supposed to be a human thing, a primate thing at the very least. But here it was. In a raven, sitting on a branch in the cold, thinking about tomorrow. So now the question changes again. It's not just, how do animals solve problems? It's, what is a mind? Because here's what all of this research keeps pointing at. Intelligence is not a single thing with a single origin. It evolved multiple times, independently, in birds, in cephalopods, in primates, in social insects. Each time the environment got complex enough, minds got more complex too. Cognition is not a human invention. It is a survival tool so useful that the universe keeps reinventing it, over and over again, in wildly different bodies, with wildly different brains. Or in the octopus's case, with no central brain at all. And this is where it gets quietly terrifying. If intelligence evolved that many times, if problem solving emerged independently across species that share almost nothing in common, then intelligence is not special. It is inevitable. It is what complex environments do to complex nervous systems, given enough pressure and enough time. Minds happen. So, what does that make your mind? Something unique, or just the latest version of a very old trick? Think about the last hard problem you solved. Maybe it was a conversation you had to navigate carefully. Maybe it was figuring out money or a job or a relationship. You probably felt like you were reasoning, like you were making a choice. And you were. But so was the crow. So was the raven. So was the octopus pulling itself toward a strange bottle just to see what was inside. The difference between you and them is not the presence of intelligence. It is the tools intelligence had available. They had sticks and stones and social groups and centuries of accumulated behavior. You had all of that plus language, plus writing, plus the internet. You are not smarter than a raven. You are a raven with better equipment, built up by 10,000 years of inherited solutions, most of which you didn't ask for, most of which you don't understand, most of which you use every single day without thinking. And here's the part that should sit with you. Wild animals solve complex problems alone, without books, without schools, without anyone explaining the rules. They reach inside whatever a mind is and find something that works, every single time. You have every advantage they don't. And still, the crow beat the PhD student. The raven planned farther ahead than the ape. The octopus opened the bottle, not because they are like us, but because intelligence was never ours to begin with. We didn't invent thinking. We just built more furniture around it and called it civilization. The animals are still out there with nothing but their minds, solving problems we never thought to set for them, and doing just fine.